Welcome to today's interview on Brighteon.com. I'm Mike Adams, and today we're joined by a first-time guest, Dr. Wiiliam Mקיs, and he has been a prolific writer on Twitter or X, but also on Substack, and he is a radiologist, an oncologist, a cancer researcher, and what I asked him to come on to talk about is how he is tweeting about the epinephrine protocols and ivermectin protocols that some people are using, you could say experimentally, to treat cancer or to prevent cancer. And I just want to say as a disclaimer, I'm not your doctor, and also our guest is not your doctor. So this is just for understanding and for studying and researching this topic. But Dr. Wiiliam Mקיs, welcome to the show today. It's great to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm just thrilled to have you here, and I'm so grateful that you are constantly educating people about this subject of ivermectin and epinephrine, two, you could say pharmaceuticals, but ivermectin comes from soil microbes, and epinephrine, I think, also comes from a natural source originally. But these are powerful substances. So please give us a little intro of what got you interested in talking about these two drugs and their applications in human health.
Well, I can tell you these are considered repurposed drugs, and they are antiparasitics. They are used for various parasite infections. They act on different types of parasites. So ivermectin acts on certain groups of parasites. Fenbendazole acts on other parasites, and they are being repurposed right now for cancer. Now, it's interesting because fenbendazole was discovered completely accidentally. It was back in 2017. A gentleman in Oklahoma, Joe Tippins, a gentleman in his 60s, I believe, was diagnosed with terminal cancer, stage 4 small cell lung cancer, and he was sent home to die by his doctors. And he had a veterinary friend of his who said, "Listen, there's a dog medicine, a dog dewormer medicine that was discovered accidentally to have very strong anti-cancer properties. Why don't you try it? You have nothing to lose." And he put together a protocol with this fenbendazole medicine and also with curcumin, CBD oil, vitamin E. And he cured his terminal cancer that he had basically less than 1% chance of surviving.
Wow.
And so that was back in 2017. And so this has been known for a few years now. There is a Facebook group called the Fenbendazole Cancer Support Group. It has 110,000 members. A lot of them are cancer patients. Some of them are family members of cancer patients. So this is a large community, and it works. In fact, there was a group of Stanford University medical researchers who were so impressed by fenbendazole that they found 3 patients who had taken fenbendazole, stage 4 cancer patients, who took fenbendazole, cured their stage 4 cancers after they had failed every chemotherapy regimen known to mankind. And they published this case series. Now, what's funny is that they were not able to recommend fenbendazole to these patients because it's not FDA approved.
Right.
Now there is an FDA approved version of it called mebendazole, which is virtually identical. Unfortunately, it goes by the brand name Vermox. It's much more expensive than fenbendazole, but you can now get generic versions of both for $1 a pill. And
so this is what's extraordinary is that both of these drugs are readily available over the counter for veterinary use.
Yes.
For example, and they're very inexpensive because they're both long off patent. So the generic versions are readily available. Let me give out your Twitter handle. It's Mקיs MD. That's Makis MD. Mקיs MD. Yeah, show the screen if you would, please. There. Here's your channel on Twitter, and then you also have the Substack, which is makismd.substack.com. That brings up your Substack page here with your articles. So, and here we go. Ivermectin and fenbendazole testimonial, stage 4 prostate cancer patient. So, one question that has come to my mind in this is, why are you so passionate about this topic? I mean, at first glance, someone who's skeptical might be thinking that you're selling fenbendazole, but that's not the case. What brings you so much passion about this?
I can tell you, I have come at this completely from outside of mainstream medicine. This is really not allowed in mainstream medicine. Right now, repurposed drugs are being suppressed. They're being suppressed. And let me go to the other one, which is ivermectin. Ivermectin has a huge body of research in cancer. And this has come out of people digging into ivermectin for treating COVID-19, for example. We know that it treats COVID-19 successfully, but as some of us were digging through that research, I discovered, for example, that there is a tremendous body of research of ivermectin actually treating cancer successfully and different kinds of cancer. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, a group of Mexican researchers tested ivermectin against 28 different cancers. They had, these different types of cancers in their lab, and they said, "Look, we're gonna test ivermectin against all of these 28 different cancers," and they found every single cancer responded to ivermectin. Now, some responded better, some responded maybe not as well. But all 28 cancers responded to ivermectin. The one that responded the best was ovarian cancer. The second best was breast cancer, and then followed by prostate cancer. And then you've got colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, and so on. The various leukemias, lymphomas, and so on. And so there's this tremendous body of preclinical research. There's research on mice, and they actually gave ivermectin to children with leukemia and managed to put 2 of them into remission. These were children who had very aggressive leukemia. They took ivermectin and they were put into remission for a while, after, even though chemo had failed. Now, unfortunately, again, ivermectin is off patent. It went off patent in 1996. Merck had a patent on it. Now they're no longer interested in it. During the pandemic, Merck came out and said, "Hey, listen, ivermectin doesn't work for COVID-19. Don't use it." and everybody wondered, why would they do that? Why would they bash their own drug?
Right.
And I discovered the answer earlier this year. It turns out that Merck has a 50-50 partnership with Moderna. And what they are developing is they're developing an mRNA cancer vaccine together. It's now in phase 3 clinical trials. It's a $500,000 treatment once it comes out. They're first developing it for melanoma. There's now a doctor in Australia, Professor Richard Scollier, who actually developed a brain cancer after taking a number of COVID-19 vaccines, and he's using their experimental technology, mRNA technology, this mRNA cancer vaccine, to try to treat his brain cancer. He's the first person in the world to be getting this experimental treatment from Moderna and Merck, which used to have the patent on ivermectin. And of course, we know that ivermectin had to be suppressed for the mRNA technology to get a green light, to get emergency authorization approval, and to get approved for the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. Once you start piecing this together, you see the pieces of the puzzle fall.
We also know, 100%. And our audience is well informed on this point, but let me just state the obvious, which is that the drug companies are only interested in profit. They have zero interest in human health, in quality of life, in extending lifespan, zero. And anybody who assigns to these large drug companies any kind of humanitarian motivation is kidding themselves. They're only interested in profit, which means the suppression of low-cost, safe, readily available treatments. And folks, it's not a conspiracy, it's a business model. It's a business model, okay? So the suppression of this, and also remember the FDA, of course, suppressed ivermectin during COVID. They sent out tweets saying that, "Are you a horse? Stop eating horse paste." And it was later determined that was illegal for them to put that tweet out. But the suppression of this continues to this day, doesn't it? Even in the science journals.
It does, and it's absolutely incredible because I have cancer patients asking me every day, and they're asking, "Oh, Dr. Mrakis, can you recommend a doctor who's going to prescribe ivermectin for me to treat my cancer?" And they're asking because about a few weeks ago, there was a paper published. It was the first paper in the world, co-authored by myself and Dr. Paul Merrick from the FLCCC and a dozen other co-authors, some incredible, amazing scientists and doctors from around the world. We authored a paper that proposed the first protocol using ivermectin, mebendazole, and phenbendazole in the treatment of aggressive cancers. And so naturally, patients are coming to me and they're asking, "Oh, Dr. Makiss, can you recommend a doctor in the States who's going to prescribe ivermectin for cancer for me?" And I usually tell them only if they're suicidal or if they want to see their career finished, because
Right.
because what's happened is that doctors like Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. Paul Merrick, who recommended and were advocates for ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine in the treatment of COVID-19, they have been stripped of their internal medicine board certifications.
Yes, that's right.
This has something that has never been done before in the history of the United States in medicine. Same thing in Canada. We had a doctor who prescribed ivermectin for COVID back in 2021. For 3 years, the medical authorities dragged him through court proceedings and then slapped him with a $40,000 fine and stripped him of his license for several months. I mean, this is the kind of persecution we've never seen in medicine. And this is over ivermectin, something that's 100 times safer than Tylenol or Advil.
We are, and remember, we the public we're always told that medicine is evidence-based. But it turns out that when the evidence doesn't support the profits of the drug companies, then the evidence is thrown out. And like you say, people who advocate for these safer, lower risk, more affordable interventions, they can have their licenses yanked because the government entities control their licenses in terms of, let's say, state medical license boards, or as you said, internal licensing, which is done through a different organization that has its own decision board, but they're heavily influenced by pharma. Obviously, pharma controls everything in this space. But I want to ask you, you mentioned, well, two things. You mentioned earlier, you said that one of the protocols that man used in 2017 involved also curcumin, or you either said curcumin or turmeric. I forgot which one, but I want to ask you, what natural phytochemicals can help accentuate the effects of ivermectin and phenbendazole when used in these protocols? Is that something that has been studied and is known? Is turmeric one of them?
Well, I can tell you that there is a study that was done on mice that showed that vitamin E had a synergy with phenbendazole and seemed to actually shrink tumors better when you combine them together. Nobody knows why that synergy works, for example. I'll give you another example. For example, CBD oil. CBD oil, cannabidiol, is a fantastic molecule that has, again, a massive body of preclinical research. There are at least 2 case reports of it curing lung cancer. And when I say curing lung cancer, I actually mean curing a 3 or 4 centimeter lung lesion completely disappearing after maybe 2 or 3 months of just taking CBD oil, a few drops under the tongue every day.
Yes.
This has been reported. These were 80-year-old patients who declined chemotherapy. They said, "Look, I'm too old to take chemotherapy. Please don't give me these harsh drugs." And they cured their lung cancer with just CBD oil drops under the tongue for a few months. It has cured skin cancer. So there were patients who were putting CBD oil on their skin cancer, and it basically dropped off after a couple of months, and their skin cancer was cured.
Wow.
We don't hear about these, right? We don't hear about these cures because CBD oil, it's something you buy for $50 or $100 at most. And again, there's no money. There's no money there's no money in certain cures, right? And again, I would love to see a clinical trial of 1,000 patients. I believe actually Professor Angus Daglish from the UK did a trial of almost 200 patients with CBD oil, and about 92% of them had some kind of a positive response, whether it slowed down the cancer, whether it stopped the cancer, whether it cured the cancer. Sort of people had various types of responses. But he published this several years ago, and we simply don't hear about this in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe that's going to change coming up, and I want to ask you about what you see if RFK Jr. is confirmed for HHS. I want to ask you about that in a minute, but let's go back to something else, which is the safety margins or the safety profile of these. You said it's 100 times safer than other interventions. Talk to us about the safety of ivermectin and phenben, and also how hard is it to overdose, and what does an overdose cause? And I know that, typically these are dosed at a certain number of milligrams or micrograms per kilogram per day. But not everybody's great at that math, sometimes.
Sure.
So what happens if someone takes too much?
Well, I can tell you, so it's very interesting. Dr. Pierre Corey, who's written a book on ivermectin, and he's done a deep dive into the research of safety and so on. I've done a deep dive into the safety research as well, and he's gone on record saying that you basically cannot overdose on ivermectin. That even if you take 100 times the dose, you might have confusion or fatigue. It's got an 18-hour half-life. By 2 days, it's completely out of your system. So you might get tired, you might get confused. You sleep it off, and it's gone. It's out of your system. So you can't really overdose on ivermectin, which is when they created the studies to sabotage ivermectin in the big journals. They couldn't do it by overdosing ivermectin, so they had to do it by underdosing ivermectin.
Oh, really?
And either using it too late or using not enough of a dose. And that's how they tampered with the studies to show that ivermectin doesn't work.
I do remember that in COVID, ivermectin has to be administered very early. Correct?
Yeah, it's good to administer it early. And of course, you want to. There was a dose range, so if you underdosed it, then you might not get the effect that you wanted.
Yes.
I tend to use sort of a little bit higher dose when it comes to any kind of viral infections, but really any kind of infections in general. I tend to go towards about 0.5 milligram per kilogram. I believe the lowest was 0.2 milligrams per kilograms, but in some of these journals, they might have gone even lower. And they waited a long time, right? They waited until the patient was really sick, and then they gave ivermectin and they only gave it for a few days, and they said, oh, look, it doesn't work, right? I mean, it was such scientific fraud. It was just pure scientific fraud, many of these studies published in
Yes.
highly respected journals. And they did it to sabotage ivermectin. They did the same thing to hydroxychloroquine.
Absolutely.
We know they did it as soon as President Trump came out and had mentioned hydroxychloroquine as an option. We suddenly had these papers come out in the New England Journal of Medicine or Lancet saying that suddenly hydroxychloroquine is causing heart problems. When 50 years of use, there was no record of heart problems with hydroxychloroquine, and then suddenly there were these questionable papers that had come out. Of course, many of them were then retracted and were, identified as fraudulent.
Yeah, I recall the Lancet publishing a study on hydroxychloroquine that the data set for it was utterly fabricated.
Yeah.
Created by a company that was run by, I think, an adult actress and a fiction novel writer or something. It was completely insane. But this is the moment when a lot of people, the COVID moment, this is when Western medicine destroyed its credibility, in my opinion. And
Absolutely.
Many people woke up. And now we're seeing even guys like myself who have been steeped in the world of natural medicine, and I would never have recommended pharmaceuticals, but now I'm pro-ivermectin, pro-fen-bendazole, because I recognize, a molecule is a molecule. If a molecule is efficacious and not just sold as a patented for-profit item, and especially if it's off patent and it's being attacked by the establishment, then that alone lends credibility to the idea of looking at this, right? So I take ivermectin prophylactically if I'm going to speak publicly, for example. If I'm going to be around a bunch of people, I will take ivermectin a day before, the day, and the day after. I'll do 12 milligrams per day for 3 days. And that's worked for me. Do you find a lot of people taking it prophylactically as well?
I do. And I'm asked this question a lot, especially when it comes to cancer, because people want to take things prophylactically for cancer as well. And unfortunately, there's not much research right now in terms of prophylaxis for cancer. What you describe as prophylaxis for, let's say, not getting a viral infection, for example. And that's very, very reasonable. 12 milligrams is a dose you can't go wrong. You won't have any side effects with 12 milligrams. I've used it. I've used it anytime I feel something coming on, like some kind of a flu or a cold coming on. My kids have used it and they bounce back really quickly within a day, or they've never been sick for more than a day or two, and they're right back to school feeling great. So I think it's fantastic. I think everyone should have ivermectin in their home. You can have ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. These are good things to have at home. Quercetin, zinc. These were other things that people used. Zinc, of course, an amazing antiviral, and then
I use all that. Yep.
Quercetin, hydroxychloroquine, gets the zinc into the cells to fight viruses. And this is particularly important because I see they keep stirring up this influenza H5N1. They keep trying to make something out of it. They've talked about disease X. They talked about another pandemic. So we have everything we need to fight any kind of future pandemic. There's no need to really panic. Certainly no need to be considering any more of the contaminated mRNA vaccines.
Let me mention also, shikimic acid is something that I took a special interest in for two reasons. Because it's found in traditional Chinese medicine, an herb called ba jiao, which is the eight-armed or eight-star, a star anise, I think is what we call it in English. Shikimic acid is very high in that. Shikimic acid is also found in certain pine needles. And I happen to live in central Texas where lodgepole pine trees grow. I think that's what they're called. And this species is very, very high in shikimic acid. So I can just go out and collect pine needles, make a tea out of it, boil it, and I can drink anti-pandemic medicine.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely
right.
And it's fantastic. And so pine needle tea was one of these sort of more herbal medicines that people were using to protect themselves or to treat COVID-19. And it's a great one. Dandelion root was another one that was popular. That had ability to, it was found to be able to bind the spike protein and sort of impair the activity of the spike protein. So dandelion root, black seed oil is another one, black cumin seed. One I'm thinking of is Artemisia annua. Artemisia annua,
I love it. Yes.
Sweet wormwood.
Yep.
Or the extract of it, artemisinin. What's fascinating about Artemisia annua is that it won the Nobel Prize, just like ivermectin. And when the pandemic hit, the WHO actually gave a warning to people not to use Artemisia annua and only use the synthetic, product or version of it because, you don't know what you're getting and you don't know exactly, people don't know how to use it. And so anything that was helpful for COVID-19 was attacked.
Right.
We had vitamin D attacked in Canada. We literally had the biggest health provider in Canada, Alberta Health Services, tell people do not use vitamin D as a preventative. Do not use vitamin D as a treatment for COVID-19.
It's
and
incredible.
We know that vitamin D in very, very high doses was useful and very helpful for COVID, even very sick COVID patients. Even patients that were, in the ICU still benefited from high doses of vitamin D. They attacked vitamin D. They attacked ivermectin. We had Artemisia annua was attacked. Hydroxychloroquine was attacked. Anything that patients could use to treat themselves and protect themselves was attacked.
But it's extraordinary that the governments and the health authorities and the medical journals and many of the hospitals and the protocols that were pushed on the hospitals, it seems to people like me and our audience that these were designed to cause harm, designed to cause to maximize fatalities during COVID so that they could publish higher COVID fatality numbers to scare more people into taking the vaccine, for example, or scare people into lockdowns or scare people into wearing masks. I mean, this was the moment in history when the people of Western civilization witnessed their governments and their medical institutions weaponized and turned against them. Is that, would you disagree with that? Or do you think that's what we witnessed? Or what would you add to that?
That's absolutely correct. And I think there's no better visual for that than when they put sand in the skate parks and they put wooden bars across basketball nets and they put caution tapes around playgrounds and basically forced kids to stay inside instead of play outside like they should have been.
Wow.
I will never forget that visual. That was the exact opposite of what they should have done. They should have allowed kids to go outside and play in the playgrounds, be outside, get sunshine, get fresh air. Everything that came out of public health was designed to make people sicker, and to really run up. And I do believe there was an effort to run up the deaths. If we look at what happened at in the long-term care home settings, where you had people who were malnourished, dehydrated, they were not given antibiotics, they were allowed to basically get so sick until they were then brought in, put in the ICUs, put on ventilators, put on remdesivir, which destroyed, their kidneys, and then they died in the hospital. And virtually all of the deaths occurred in the hospital under hospital protocols.
Right.
You didn't have homeless people dying. You didn't have people dying at home. How come we didn't have thousands of people dying of COVID in their homes? They only died when they got to the hospital.
Well, I would say that's because they were homicided in the hospitals. And the hospitals got financial incentives for doing so.
Yes.
In some cases, up to $500,000.
Absolutely.
So Dr. Makiss, number one, I just want to say thank you for your courage. Thank you for being a truth teller. Thank you for all that you've done. You got my attention on X, and I've been retweeting what you've put out there, and I've been using ivermectin. I've been using fenbend myself. And I've been acquiring it. I've been buying it from veterinary sources. I also live on a ranch. I have donkeys and goats need a lot of ivermectin, by the way, because they eliminate it very quickly, I found out. So you have to really hyperdose the goats. But I use it for dogs, goats, and I've got chickens and whatever. But I believe that every person should have a supply of ivermectin and fenbendazole and some other things, but this is the focus here today. And for some reason, a lot of people, they ask you, can you give me a doctor who can prescribe it? Why would you want to pay $20 a pill when you could pay $1 a pill or whatever, What's your recommendation or if you can make a recommendation? I don't want to get you into any trouble, but I've already said, I just buy agricultural or veterinary use versions. Is that consistent with what a lot of people are doing today, or what are your comments on this?
I'll tell you right now, there are websites. I believe there's righttotry.com, for example, where you can just buy ivermectin. There are a number of pharmacies in India that people are ordering the generic versions of ivermectin or fenbendazole or mebendazole from. It can take a few weeks, it could take 3-4 weeks to arrive, but a lot of people have successfully been able to get ivermectin like that. And there are also the veterinary versions of ivermectin. I can tell you in Canada, for example, we have a lot of farmers, and we had trouble getting ivermectin. I know that in the United States, the issue was that you could get a prescription, but then the pharmacy wouldn't fill it.
Yeah, true. That's crazy.
Which to me is absolutely insane. It's actually criminal.
Yes.
But in Canada, we had a different issue. We had no doctor could prescribe it because they would be stripped of their license immediately.
Wow.
So people were, they had to get creative and get veterinary versions of ivermectin. And the liquid version of ivermectin is fantastic.
Yep.
Some people use the paste. In terms of cancer, you need larger doses of ivermectin, so that, may not be feasible with the paste, for example. But, I've got hundreds of cancer patients, and I'd say about 30% of them are taking some sort of veterinary version. It's sort of on their own accord. It's safe. I've seen no safety issues with it at all. And we all do what we can for our health, and we try to get access however we can. Now, this is something I think the new administration will have to tackle. The Trump administration with RFK Jr. As the head of the HHS, I think it's something very, very important. I believe that in the United States, everyone should have access over the counter to ivermectin. And this is, a human grade ivermectin, mebendazole. I think fenbendazole should get FDA approval as well. There's no reason for fenbendazole to not be FDA approved when you've got mebendazole, which is virtually almost the identical molecule, except one atom is different, and it's got FDA approval. That should be FDA approved, and it should be available. It should be available to every American. I really believe in this right to try. Where if you're a cancer patient, you should have access to these safe medications. And despite the fact that they're being repurposed from antiparasitics to cancer, but everyone should have access to these.
I agree.
To me, it's unacceptable that in America you don't have access. You have to act like you're on a black market trying to get some secret forbidden medicine that anyone can get at the airport in Mexico as much as they want.
Well, I know it's crazy. They turn us into drug smugglers just to try to get common sense medications. When I lived in Ecuador, we could walk into any pharmacy and you could buy any pill you wanted. And of course, they sold them like one pill at a time also. Like you could just get one of these. But same thing's true in Mexico, even in Canada. There used to be a lot more availability than there is now. But in India, ivermectin's over the counter across India. And a lot of people use it there. And that's why, I think that's one of the reasons why they did not have such a rate of deaths associated with the pandemic in India. But I do want to ask you about the changes that might be headed our way if RFK Jr. is nominated as head of HHS. Now, I think the best thing about RFK Jr. is the fact that he knows where all the skeletons are buried, or in the case of Fauci, that's a literal thing because of his experiments on young African-American boys. But they literally are dead and buried. But what good things could happen in America if RFK Jr. goes in there and does some really aggressive reforms to support health freedom and consumer choice? I mean, right now people can buy Tylenol over the counter. That's acetaminophen. That causes extreme liver toxicity, especially when combined with alcohol. People kill themselves all the time on New Year's Eve with Tylenol and alcohol. That's over the counter. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. No, honestly, I think we're in a situation right now, and we didn't talk about this earlier, but I wanted to mention it because Dr. Peter McCullough and I have been affected by this. We had a paper on sudden deaths in COVID-19 vaccinated individuals, autopsy paper, the largest autopsy series in the world. It was censored by The Lancet.
Yep.
It was then censored by another journal. It was ready to be published, and then there was a phone call made to the editor, and they killed it at the last second. It has finally passed peer review and been published, but it's taken 2 years of extreme censorship, and the paper's been pulled several times for no reason other than a political reason and maybe a financial reason from pressure from the pharmaceutical industry. And so this has happened a number of times. A number of papers have been pulled. I've had this paper pulled with Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. Jessica Rose have had several papers pulled. And it's because these papers were inconvenient to the pharmaceutical industry, where there might be some losses suffered by certain pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer or Moderna. And to have this kind of scientific censorship is unprecedented and unacceptable. And so what I think we've seen is a corruption take over medicine in general, because we had censorship. Doctors weren't allowed to give informed consent to their patients about the COVID-19 vaccines. They weren't allowed to tell their patients about the risks. Well, you can't do that. You can't have informed consent if you're not allowed to tell patients about the risk of the vaccines, because you might cause vaccine hesitancy. If you've got a product that has risks, you must disclose those risks to patients. And so we need to bring back ethics back into science and into medicine. We also need to bring freedom back. And what that means is that doctors and scientists have to have the freedom to practice their craft ethically in order to have good science and good medicine. We don't have that right now. We certainly don't have that in the United States or Canada. What we have is corruption. We have censorship, the likes of which we've never seen before. We have too much influence of big pharma. We have all kinds of retaliation from the medical boards. All of that has to stop. And we need what I call a complete reset. Yes. We talk about they were talking about the great reset after, the COVID-19 pandemic. And what they were talking about was trying to, get us reset into this kind of dystopian future with digital ID and vaccine passports and all of this and restricted travel and this kind of communist great reset. And what we need is a great reset in science and medicine, but a reset back to ethical practices, ethical medicine, and really freedom, the freedom to do proper science without any fear of retribution or retaliation from the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, effectively what you're describing is that in the United States, I know you live in Canada, but in the United States, of course, with our Bill of Rights, back in the early 1790s or late 1780s, when the Bill of Rights was being debated before it was finally written and signed, you had Dr. Benjamin Rush saying that we needed a health freedom amendment, and that was not incorporated. But I think that should be the Third Amendment, and the current Third Amendment, which is that we shall not allow British soldiers to be quartered in our homes. I don't think like that's as important as a health freedom amendment. So we can bump the Third Amendment, put in a health freedom amendment, keep the Second and the First. We obviously need those. Expand the First Amendment to cover health claims on natural products. So even doctors like you need to be able to have your freedom of speech. If you were to practice in America, your freedom of speech has to be protected. You need to be able to tell the truth about natural products that work without having your medical license threatened, which is exactly what's happened. So freedom of speech, and also freedom of speech for nutritional supplement manufacturers, that why can't let's say a tart cherry extract maker tell the truth and link to a government study that says cherry extract treats gout? Why is that illegal effectively? Yeah. That's crazy. So we need that. I agree with you.
I absolutely agree. We need I mean, that sounds like a fantastic idea. A health freedom amendment. I would fully support that. It's amazing right now. I'll tell you something. I'm able to treat patients with ivermectin, but I'm doing it outside of the medical establishment. And so I'm doing it as a health coach, as a cancer coach, because that doesn't have, strict regulations in Canada. And so, but it's tragic that I have to, give this kind of help to patients, and I'm seeing incredible results. I share them on my Twitter. I share them on my Substack. We see it in the blood work. We see it on the imaging studies. We see the tumor shrinking, and there's no denying it that their patients are being helped, and they're being helped. They're afraid to tell their oncologists that they're taking something else in addition to the chemo that they may be taking, for example. They're right. They're afraid to speak to their doctors, and I have to do it completely outside of the medical establishment as their health coach and not as their doctor. This is like practicing, medicine in like on the black market. It's like you would be doing it in communism.
Right.
We can't have that. I mean, this is absolutely unacceptable.
Well, it is. And the cancer industry, which I've been covering for over 20 years, really preys upon humanity, poisons people for profit, frightens people with often false diagnoses of cancer. That's a very common thing to do a mammogram on a woman and then say, oh, you have cancer and you're going to die in 6 months if you don't start chemotherapy. And then that same clinic profits from the sale of the chemotherapy drugs. So you have these perverse incentives there. And where that woman, as you said, breast cancer is one of the cancers that responds in a very positive way to ivermectin treatment. But they don't tell her that option, or they don't even tell her her vitamin D may be deficient. You have a lot of black women who have aggressive breast cancers because the melanin in their skin is blocking vitamin D production. So they're vitamin D deficient, almost to the point where if they had a child, the child would be born with rickets. That's how bad it is. But the cancer industry won't tell them you're vitamin D deficient. They'll just profit off of them.
You're absolutely right. Every single patient that comes to me, I ask them about their vitamin D levels, and virtually none of them know about the importance of vitamin D in cancer. The fact that if you have low vitamin D, you have poor prognosis as a cancer patient. Right. over the long term. And I asked them, I said, well, has your oncologist tested your vitamin D levels, for example? And all of them say, no, they've never mentioned it.
That's incredible.
They have never mentioned it. Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. Like, we don't really have a system of medicine. We have a system, the establishment system is a profiteering racket. it's really it's a criminal racketeering operation, in my opinion. And I've been railing against this for 20 plus years. And now we finally, there's some hope. There's some hope of real change here, but only after how many millions of people were killed, over the last several years because of hospital protocols and so on. But in the few minutes we have left, Dr. Makiss, I want to be respectful of your time. You mentioned health coaching. Is that a service that you offer to people all over the world, or how can people get in touch with you to take advantage of that?
Yeah, right now I'm offering it all over the world. So I have patients from around the world. I have patients. I have a ton of U.S. patients. I've got patients in Australia, all over Europe, even in parts of Asia as well. I offer it through my email. People can message me at makisw79@yahoo.com, and then I'll provide the details and so on of what the package entails, and it's very affordable, and I do offer follow-up as well. And I also help people get access to ivermectin or fen-bendazole or mebendazole. This has been really beautiful is that other cancer patients have shared with me how they've managed to get access to some of these repurposed drugs, because it's not easy for the average person. They go out there, they have no idea where to start, where to look for these repurposed drugs. And as I said, one thing that I look forward to, and one reason why I applied to RFK Jr.'s MAHA team, Make America Healthy Again, at HHS, and I would love to serve, in sort of any capacity, any way that I can help, is to make these repurposed drugs available, make them available over the counter, so that everyone has access to these antivirals that have been so effective for patients. I can tell you, I've seen miraculous stories with ivermectin, and you've got incredible doctors in the United States who've treated thousands of patients with ivermectin successfully. They're still being persecuted by their medical boards. They're being stripped of their licenses, like Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Ryan Cole, Dr. Mary Bowden, Dr. Peter McCullough. They're being stripped of their licenses and their certifications. I mean, that every doctor should be restored, fully compensated. Every doctor who got things right during the pandemic, should be, restored and compensated properly, and maybe put in charge of some important health position, because, a lot of doctors got it wrong. And the doctors who rolled over and gave up their medical ethics and gave up their Hippocratic oath, shouldn't be in any position of power going forward. And I hope, and like you said, we have this opportunity, and it's not even a once in a generational opportunity. It's once in a lifetime opportunity to fix a system that has been rotten for a very long time, and a system that should really function for the benefit of Americans.
Well, and I've said that the problem with the system is that it's too centralized, and the central authorities can easily become corrupted due to money or political influence or some other agenda, which is exactly what we saw. I don't think, you may disagree with me, and that's fine, but I don't think that governments or states should license doctors at all. Instead, I think that there should be accountability and results for every doctor, that a patient is even encouraged to go to a common website and report the diagnosis and the results and the treatments. And so over time, we would gather a tremendous amount of evidence of what treatments work, which doctors are effective. The data would be amazing, but the industry's not interested in data. They're just interested in profits. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you that the licensing process, certainly in Canada, but even in the United States, the licensing process has been completely corrupted. The medical bodies have been co-opted and captured.
Yes.
And that's another problem, is institutional capture. And that's why I talk about it. We need a complete reset. We need a complete reset in medicine and science because of the institutional capture. And, in the United States, you have the three-letter agencies that have been captured, whether it's the FDA, the CDC, and NIH, and so on. And so you have problems with those giant behemoth institutions that have so much influence on how medicine is practiced in the United States. But, we have the same kind of problem in Canada with bureaucracies, with Health Canada being 90% funded by, big pharma.
Yep.
But all of these medical boards and all of these colleges of physicians in Canada that have persecuted and targeted doctors and censored doctors, they have to be either dismantled or they have to be prosecuted.
I agree.
Because they took away the voices of doctors who would have put this pandemic fraud and this vaccine fraud to bed very, very early on. If doctors were allowed to speak up without fear of retribution and retaliation, we would have had the vaccine called out back in 2021 when there were various reports accumulating of sudden deaths, when there were reports of myocarditis being far more common than anybody was willing to admit, blood clots, when all these problems started showing up in early and mid 2021, if there wasn't retaliation and if there wasn't a gun pointed to every doctor in North America to keep their mouth shut, this whole vaccine disaster wouldn't have happened. And so
I completely agree.
We need to disassemble that entire corrupt system.
We need a medical reset. Completely agree with what you just said. Now, again, wrapping this up, for people to reach you, I think the email address you gave was makisw79 at yahoo.com. At yahoo.com. Okay. W79. So Makis, Makis, W79 at yahoo.com. Your Substack is makismd.substack.com. Here's your page here. And look, you are followed by 56 people that I follow. Amazing. What are the odds? Any final thoughts, Dr. Maka's? I mean, this has been a great conversation. What would you like to wrap it up with?
Honestly, I just encourage people to keep speaking out. I get incredible stories. I get incredible stories in my inbox, and I'll get stories of people who used my protocols for, to treat cancer with ivermectin or fen-bendazole or mebendazole, and they used it on their animals, and their animals are doing better. Or they used the protocol, because they heard that, it's good in Lyme disease or in Parkinson's disease. So right now I have 2 Parkinson's disease patients who are improving on ivermectin and have had dramatic improvement because there's a preclinical study in mice showing that mice had improvements in Parkinson-like symptoms on ivermectin. And this all comes from sharing of information, the free sharing of information.
Yes.
And I think this is so crucial for people to speak out. We have a platform. We have a freedom platform on X, on Twitter. I would just encourage people to share their stories, share their experiences. You never know who's reading, who's watching, and how other people can benefit from it. That's why I'm so active on X. I'm very thankful to Elon Musk and his team. I was banned from Twitter for over a year for raising concerns about mRNA vaccinating kids 5 to 11 years old. I thought that was a terrible idea. And within 5 hours of saying that, I was locked out of my account. My account was terminated, and I was, kicked out of Twitter for over a year, just for pointing out there was a study that showed negative vaccine efficacy for these kids when they were vaccinated, that they would get sicker more often, and which was a fact, it was a scientific study that was peer reviewed and published. And so this is the kind of, scientific censorship that went on during the pandemic. So I would just encourage people to keep speaking out, keep sharing your stories. And we're all learning from each other.
100%. Well, and I'll one up you on that. I was banned from Twitter, I think, for 6 years, and I've been banned from YouTube for 10 years so far. And it's still going. And it's pretty much because of me speaking out against Big Pharma, by the way. So, and vaccines do cause autism in some cases. It's obvious at this point. But Dr. Maka's, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing for humanity. I've learned a lot from you. I've shared your information with many people, and I will continue to do so. Please keep in touch with us and let us know how we can help you with your mission. And just, God bless you for all that you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Maka's.